have a really fundamental understanding of what fusion is, let's talk about Lockheed's patent that was first filed in 2014 and awarded in 2018. Now, it was filed under the unassuming name of encapsulating magnetic fields for plasma confinement. The fusion device it describes would use superconductors to produce a magnetic field that can house superheated plasma within the confines of its reaction chamber 2,000 times better than any existing fusion system, at least according to them. It serves as the backbone of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works Compact Fusion Reactor, or CFR program. According to their patent paperwork, this really efficient design allows for smaller fusion reactors than ever previously thought possible. And that small size allows for not only expedited development, but also a much broader range of potential applications. Now, the patent comes with a 26-page document explaining all of this, and I quote it pretty heavily throughout my full write-up on this topic, but for the sake of time, and because a lot of these quotes are pretty clunky, I'm going to summarize them as we move through. But if you're interested in this specific language, I highly recommend reading the patent or the article after you watch this video. Now, this is going to seem really complex, but all you really need to worry about are the numbers. The ratio of plasma volume contained within a fusion reactor to the magnetic energy density within it is known within fusion circles as the beta limit. Basically, fusion power output increases with pressure, but that magnetic field costs money to produce. It takes resources. So the amount of plasma that you can keep inside that reactor housed within the magnetic field that you can produce is really the limiting factor for fusion power production. The beta limit dictates the amount of power you can produce. Most systems today have a beta limit of between 0.01 and 0.05, or between 1 and 5%. In fact, a 5% system is considered pretty efficient. The system laid out in the Skunk Works patent, on the other hand, is expected to offer a beta limit of 1. As in, not 1%, but 100%. This time, I will quote Dr. Thomas McGuire, the head of the Skunk Works Compact Fusion Project. The system is therefore regulated by a self-tuning feedback mechanism, whereby the farther out the plasma goes, the stronger the magnetic field pushes back to contain it. According to the Skunk Works, a single reactor using their confinement system could run continuously for a year on just 25 pounds of fuel, all while producing roughly 100 megawatts of power. That's enough to power the homes of 100,000 people. Potential applications for this kind of device are staggering, and the Skunk Works patent includes pretty obvious ones, like powering an aircraft carrier, as well as more novel ones, like containerized fusion trucks to provide emergency electricity to cities after natural disasters. But it'll come as no surprise to you that the part of the patent that really caught my eye was a reactor made small enough to be housed within the fuselage of an F-16. In order to understand how nuclear fusion could power an aircraft's propulsion, it would really first help to understand how turbofans and turbojets work to begin with. But again, we're talking about an exacting science here, so please bear with me while I give you a pretty simplistic summary. Modern turbojet engines, or jet engines as we tend to call them, suck in air from the front of the engine and compress it until it's usually between 3 and 12 times the density that it started out as. Fuel is then added to the compressed air and ignited. That newly ignited air-fuel mixture usually hits temperatures of around 1100 to 1300 degrees Fahrenheit as it passes through a turbine, which drives the compressor that squished the air to begin with on its way out of a nozzle to produce thrust. Turbofan engines, like those you'd find on a commercial airliner or some sorts of bombers, work with a pretty similar premise. But incoming air is split into two different flows. One passes through the fan and continues into the compressor to follow that same process. The rest of the airflow bypasses that internal engine and simply passes through the propeller, slightly increasing its velocity and adding a bit more thrust as it goes through. According to the Lockheed patent, the combustor found in those turbojet and turbofan engines could be replaced by a heat exchanger plumbed to the fusion reactor. Superheated coolant would flow out of the fusion reactor, through a fuel processor, through an auxiliary power unit, and into the engine, where it would heat the air the same way combustion would without the need for fuel. It would then flow back through the APU, the fuel processing unit, and back to the reactor to do the whole thing again. This could mean aircraft going their entire service lives without ever needing to refuel. And while that might just sound convenient to those of you who think of refueling in terms of stopping at the gas station, the truth is it would be a way bigger deal than that. Today, the Air Force alone operates 490 refueling tankers, and they're absolutely vital to national security. Most of America's fighters only have enough fuel to stay on station for about 30 minutes once they get to the fight. After that, they need to either head home or head for a tanker. Long-duration bombing missions are absolutely reliant on meeting tankers at precise points along their flight paths. Tankers themselves, though, are pretty vulnerable aircraft, and in a fight against a near peer, with advanced air defenses and significant air power to draw from, it would invariably mean losing a lot of these gas stations in the sky. Most years, the Air Force burns through around 2 billion gallons of aviation fuel. Fusion could literally drop that to near zero, all while giving fighters, bombers, drones, and other platforms practically limitless range and loiter time. And because fusion reactors don't function anything like fission weapon systems, captured or recovered reactors from downed aircraft would pose very little risk of either environmental contamination or giving the bad guy a chance to reverse engineer nuclear weapons technology out of it. But the truth is, flying without fuel is really just the beginning of what fusion could do for aviation. An abundance of electrical energy could power an array of advanced directed energy weapons, as well as groundbreaking new missile defense systems like the Navy's patented laser-induced plasma filament holograms, which literally project superheated illusions of another aircraft dozens of meters from the jet itself to confuse incoming infrared-guided weapons. But even that is still thinking small. Pretty much every facet of current aircraft design and operation is affected by the need to carry, manage, or efficiently use liquid fuel. From internal space allocation to external shape, from engine management to combat tactics. All of this, and I do mean all of this, could change if Lockheed Martin's containerized fusion concept ever comes to fruition. But by now, I can hear some of you screaming about the mind-bogglingly broad implications of fusion power, and what a travesty it is to think of it strictly in terms of weapon applications like fighters or bombers. But the truth is, there's a good reason for us to think that this technology will find its way into the fight before it finds its way into our homes. The fact of the matter is, burning oil for energy may not be good for the environment, but it's still a lot cheaper than developing a new means of power production and whole new fleets of vehicles to leverage it. While reducing oil consumption has really clear benefits in terms of the environment, it's unlikely that humanity will actually run out of it anytime soon. According to BP's statistical review of world energy, there's at least another 48 years worth of oil at 2019 usage levels in our known and existing oil reserves, using the infrastructure that's already local to them. But scientists are well aware that there's a great deal more oil still out there, either undiscovered or being stored in places that the local infrastructure can't easily access. The painful truth is that there's still a lot of oil on this earth, and it's pretty cheap to leverage. And this all brings me to the UK's Atomic Energy Authority's CEO, a man named Professor Ian Chapman, who was recently asked how long he thinks it would be before fusion became commercially viable. In response, he likened fusion to the space race. He said that in 1962, Kennedy's speech saying America would go to the moon seemed downright ludicrous, but by allocating 4% of America's GDP to the effort for the rest of the decade, they made it happen. Fusion may run on hydrogen isotopes, but to get it started, you've got to burn a big wad of money. So, while fusion may be a game changer for literally the whole planet, practical use for it may just manifest first in the shadowy confines of an Area 51 hangar, or an exotic submarine propulsion program, or some other Pentagon initiative. Ironically enough, a reliable, efficient, and safe means of producing huge surpluses of power could lead to a reduction in conflict for the rest of human history, meaning that on a long enough timeline, the DoD may just spend itself right out of the job. If you ask me, that's an outcome we can all hope for. And on that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandbox News. I'm Alex Holling.